It had the head of a horse, the torso of a man, the feet of a goat, and a long serpentine tail.
In the winter of 1909, an old terror clawed its way out of folklore and into reality. For one absolutely terrifying week, a monster didn't just haunt the dark, forgotten woods. It stalked the bustling east coast of the United States. This was an era of progress, an age of invention and reason. Yet, for 7 days, that progress was brought to a standstill by something that should not exist. It peered into city windows, its eyes glowing like hot coals in the dark. It left impossible tracks on freshly fallen snow across dozens of towns and rooftops, and it caused a panic so profound, so intense, that an army of over 1,000 ordinary people mobilized to hunt it down. This is the story of how a local ghost story, whispered around campfires for generations, erupted into the open, triggering one of the largest and most frantic monster hunts in all of American history.
Back in, I guess, the summer of 1966, I was driving in a car with my mother heading down Jackson Mills Road, and something I've never seen before jumped in front of the vehicle, and my mom kind of slurved on the brakes a little bit and then swerved. We went around it, and this was something that I've never seen, maybe 6.5, 7 feet tall. It just it kind of had its mouth open, and his arms up in the air, kind of jumping up and down, very dark in color, kind of hairy looking.
It all started with a whisper and a strange set of tracks in the snow. But within days, it exploded into a full-blown crisis. Schools locked their doors, leaving playgrounds eerily silent. Factories, the lifeblood of the industrial coast, shut down their night shifts, fearing what lurked in the darkness outside. Entire towns went into a self-imposed lockdown as a creature with the head of a horse, the gnarled wings of a bat, and those terrifying glowing red eyes was reportedly seen by over 1,000 people across multiple states. This wasn't a vague shadow in the woods. This was a creature seen in cities, on main streets. Armed posses, grim-faced and determined, began to roam the streets day and night. Public trolleys, the primary mode of transportation, were escorted by armed guards, and in a move that broadcast the sheer gravity of the situation to the entire nation, a major city zoo offered a staggering $10,000 reward for its capture. This wasn't just a legend anymore. This was the Great Panic of 1909. The whole thing kicked off on the cold, quiet morning of January the 16th, 1909. In the town of Woodbury, New Jersey, a man named Thad Cozzens, peering out his window in the pre-dawn gloom, reported seeing a bizarre, winged creature with glowing eyes just outside his home. It was a strange sight, easily dismissed as a trick of the light. But the real strangeness, the evidence that no one could ignore, came with the full light of sunrise. All across South Jersey, people woke up to find their snowy communities marked by a single, inexplicable set of tracks. They were cloven hoofprints, much like a horse's, but they followed a path that defied all logic. The tracks went straight up and over high fences without breaking stride. They appeared on the icy pitches of rooftops, only to leap across to another house without leaving a trace in the yard between. They squeezed through impossibly tight alleyways. It was as if the creature that made them didn't play by the normal rules of physics and gravity. Those who crouched down and examined the prints closely noted several details that resisted any rational accounting. The tracks measured roughly 3 inches wide, approximately the size of a small horse's hoof, cloven down the center, but a horse could not have made them. Not in this sequence, not like this. The prints appeared in a single file line, as though the creature walked fully upright, placing one foot directly in front of the other with mechanical precision. There was no evidence of the weight distribution you'd expect from a four-legged animal. No dragging, no slipping. And then there was what the tracks did not do. A living creature crossing a rooftop in 3 inches of fresh snow should have disturbed the surface, skidded on the pitch, compressed the edges of its prints with the effort of climbing, left some evidence of struggle. These prints simply appeared, evenly spaced, calm, as if whatever made them was entirely unbothered by gravity. One investigator, documenting a set of tracks that climbed a vertical fence post and continued unbroken on the other side, could only write in his official report, "No satisfactory explanation." The next day, the reports multiplied. More tracks in more towns. The unease was growing, but still, no one had gotten a clear look at what was making them. Then, on January 18, the creature itself seemed to arrive in the city of Camden. Suddenly, it was no longer a rural mystery. Sightings exploded across the region, baffling everyone who saw it. The tracks were now found in dozens of towns, and the description of the animal was just as wild. Witnesses swore it moved with a strange kangaroo-like leap, that it had a head like a horse or a ram, and that it let out a piercing, high-pitched screech that could curdle your blood. Now, the folks in South Jersey had been telling stories for over a century about a local legend from the deep, dark Pine Barrens, a creature they called the Leeds Devil. The Pine Barrens themselves are worth understanding. 1.1 million acres of dense, ancient forest sitting in the geographic heart of the most densely populated corridor in America. Even in 1909, enormous sections of it remained completely unmapped. It was the kind of place that swallowed people whole. The Leeds family was real. A man named Daniel Leeds had settled in Burlington County, New Jersey, in the late 1600s. He was a controversial figure, an almanac publisher accused by his Quaker neighbors of dabbling in occult symbols and forbidden knowledge. The mother Leeds of the legend is believed to descend from that lineage. Over the generations, the story mutated, as folk legends do. In some versions, the creature is the 12th child. In others, the 13th. In some, the mother whispers the curse in a moment of desperate exhaustion, driven mad by poverty and hunger. In others, the child isn't simply cursed. It is fathered by the devil himself, but every version agrees on what happened next. The child was born wrong. It grew. It screamed. It turned on the women gathered in that room, and then it fixed its gaze on the chimney above. Two enormous, membranous wings unfurled from its back, and it was gone, up and out into the cold night air, vanishing into the pines, where, according to the legend, it had been waiting ever since, for 174 years. But now, it suddenly seemed like the story was real, and the devil wasn't staying in the pines anymore. By January 20th, the situation had completely spiraled out of control, and the newspapers, locked in the most ferocious circulation war in American publishing history, were more than willing to pour gasoline on the fire. This was the golden age of yellow journalism. William Randolph Hearst had spent the previous decade proving, with brutal efficiency, that fear sold papers. Sensation sold papers, and nothing sold papers quite like a monster. The Philadelphia Evening Bulletin, the Camden Courier, the Trenton Times. A dozen competing papers understood this calculation implicitly. Every morning, editors faced a simple question, not whether to run the Jersey Devil story, but how much more terrifying they could make it than the edition that ran the day before. They commissioned artists to sketch the creature based on witness descriptions, then embellished freely. They published maps charting its movements across the region as though tracking a military advance. They interviewed anyone willing to talk, housewives, school teachers, clergymen, and ran their accounts without scrutiny. They reported that it had killed dogs, that it had breathed fire, claims that were never verified, never sourced, and printed without hesitation because they were exactly what a frightened, fascinated readership wanted to consume. It was when one paper reached back into the Pine Barrens folklore and published the old name, the Leeds Devil, now shortened to the Jersey Devil, that the creature's identity was permanently cemented. The name stuck. The story escaped its regional origin and hit the national wire. In doing so, these papers didn't just cover a panic, they built one. What happened in January 1909 was, in no small part, a media event, a masterclass in how a sensation-hungry press and a fear-primed public can collectively hallucinate something into existence, or at least make it very difficult to separate what was real from what was not. But the most unsettling part of this story isn't what the creature did. It's what happened when people tried to explain it away. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. School attendance in the Delaware Valley dropped by over 50% as terrified parents kept their children home, away from the windows. Factories and mills cancelled their night shifts, unwilling to ask their workers to travel in the dark. The entire region was effectively in a self-imposed lockdown, held hostage by fear. The sightings got bolder, and the witnesses more credible. In Camden, a group of firefighters battling a small blaze were stunned to see the creature on a nearby roof. They allegedly blasted it with their high-pressure hose, causing it to let out an ungodly screech before it leaped into the air and flew away. In the town of Haddon Heights, a trolley full of passengers screeched to a halt when the motorman saw a dark figure standing on the tracks ahead. As the car slid to a stop, all the passengers saw were its two red eyes, glowing in the dark. Just the sound of the screeching brakes was enough to scare it off, but the people on that trolley were left trembling and terrified. In response, trolley companies immediately began putting armed guards on their routes. The creature even made an appearance in the state capital, Trenton. A respected citizen named William Cromley told the police that a beast that looked like a bizarre dog covered in fur and feathers spooked his horse into bolting, nearly causing a catastrophic accident. In another part of the city, a woman named Mrs. William Batten was horrified to find a perfect set of cloven hoofprints leading right up the side of her house to her second-story windowsill. Perhaps the most dramatic story came from a railroad track walker in Clayton, who claimed he saw the creature land on the electrified third rail. He described a massive flash of light and an explosion that reportedly melted 20 feet of solid steel track, with accounts now coming from police officers, firefighters, and upstanding citizens. The authorities could no longer write this off as a simple prank. The collective terror finally hit its peak in Bristol, Pennsylvania, a town right across the Delaware River from the epicenter of the panic in New Jersey. There, the town's own postmaster, E.W. Minster, and a local police officer came face to face with the beast near the riverbank. They described a terrifying winged creature with a long neck and a horse's head that let out an unearthly, mournful scream. The officer, doing his duty, drew his revolver and fired at it repeatedly, but the bullets seemed to have no effect. The creature just launched itself into the air and flew off into the night. That was the last straw. The story spread like wildfire. The devil was real, and it was bulletproof. If the police couldn't stop it, the people would have to. All across the Delaware Valley, in towns and cities throughout New Jersey and Pennsylvania, armed posses began to form. Groups of dozens, sometimes hundreds of men with rifles, shotguns, and whatever weapons they could find, began patrolling the countryside and the city streets, grimly determined to bring the monster down. It was one of the largest and most spontaneous citizen mobilizations in the nation's history. Newspapers estimated that well over 1,000 people were actively hunting the creature at any given time, turning the quiet, snowy landscape into a veritable war zone. To add fuel to this already raging fire, the Philadelphia Zoo announced a massive $10,000 reward for the creature's capture, alive. In 1909, that was a fortune, enough to buy a house, a car, and still have plenty left over. The bounty turned the hunt from a mission of public safety into a frantic, high-stakes competition. For days, these posses combed the woods, swamps, and farmlands. They'd follow a fresh set of hoofprints for miles through the snow, only for the tracks to suddenly stop in the middle of an open field with nowhere to go. They fired at shadows, at strange noises in the night, their nerves frayed. And then, just as suddenly and inexplicably as it all began, it stopped. By January 23rd, the sightings had stopped as suddenly and completely as they had begun. No dramatic final encounter, no body found in the snow. The Jersey Devil simply ceased to appear. The armed posses disbanded. The factories reopened their night shifts. The trolley guards went home. And the Delaware Valley slowly, cautiously exhaled. The explanation, when it finally came, felt almost too convenient. A promoter named Norman Jeffries, connected to the Ninth and Arch Museum in Philadelphia, came forward to confess that he had staged the entire thing. He claimed he had obtained a kangaroo, painted strange markings on it, and fitted it with crude artificial wings. He had released the animal in several locations to manufacture sightings, a publicity stunt designed to drive curious Philadelphians through his museum doors. In the sensational economy of 1909, it was a believable enough scheme. For many people, it was sufficient. A clever showman had made fools of an entire region. Case closed. But the timeline does not cooperate. Jeffrey's confession accounted for a handful of staged appearances in the final days of the panic. Sightings concentrated around Philadelphia, convenient to his museum. It did not account for the January 16th tracks in Woodbury, documented before anyone had a commercial reason to manufacture anything. It did not account for the Bristol police officer who fired his service revolver at a winged creature near the riverbank in the pre-dawn hours before the Philadelphia papers had even printed the story. It did not account for the Haddon Heights trolley, an entire car full of witnesses stopped on the tracks, staring into two glowing red eyes. A painted kangaroo cannot leave cloven hoofprints on an icy rooftop. A painted kangaroo cannot leap across a gap that no animal should be able to clear. What Jeffries' confession gave a panicked, embarrassed public was an exit, a door they could walk through. And they walked through it gratefully, without asking too many questions about what didn't fit on the other side. Whether the Jersey Devil of 1909 was a calculated hoax, a regional mass hysteria, or something that genuinely resists explanation. One thing is not a folktale. It is documented. For 7 days in January, something moved through the Delaware Valley, something that left tracks where no animal should have been. Something seen by police officers, firefighters, and a postmaster who had nothing to gain from lying. And then, without explanation, it was gone. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and for keeping these stories alive. Make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because next time, we're uncovering a true story even darker than this one. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and never forget to say thank you. Thanks for watching.